Well, hey, my friend, I'm so glad that you're with me on the podcast today. I've got a new friend with me who I actually saw his work on Facebook the other day, and I was like, gosh, I want to have this guy on the podcast. Such a powerful story. Shane Grammer. Shane, thank you so much, man, for being on the Thriving Christian Artist podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. You know, Facebook is a funny thing, right? You start digging into people and you're like, hey, we know some of the same people. So I bet he's all right. This is this is great. And then that's right. Then I started looking at your work and just seeing all the incredible things that you're doing really in the middle of this crazy pandemic life that we're all living right now. And so I definitely wanted to have you on. So for those folks who've not seen you or know your work, anything like that, give us a little bit of that backstory, who you are, where you're from, what you do creatively and all that.
Oh, yeah. So, well, my roots, my love is street art and graffiti since I was in high school. And I'm an older guy now. I mean, I'm 48 years old, so I've been going at it for a long time. But I also, my background, I had a scenic shop. And a scenic shop is, we are the designers and fabricators of what you see in major parks and attractions. So I was a Walt Disney Imagineer for a short time, did projects for Universal Studios, fiberglass, sculpted rocks, trees. I'm doing this as fast as I can, but
no, that's fine.
I went from being a scenic shop that, was 4 guys to 55 people on payroll at one time. And I just absolutely hated it. Because I was the guy bringing in all the work. I wasn't doing anything creative anymore. And we'd get these packages of these beautiful things that we were supposed to fabricate, but it was, there'd be 25 people, copied to every email and approvals. And it just became a fabrication machine. And the writing on the wall was, to continue that, I had to go bigger. And
wow.
I hated it, absolutely hated it. And then I tried working for a few people for about a year and a half. And then I just said, I hate that.
So, our story is so similar. I was actually in ministry for a long time. And then I left that in 2002. I was a worship pastor and all that, but always worked in larger churches and did marketing and graphic design and all that. So I started my own firm in 2002, 2003 and loved it. And then I was a great salesperson, right? So I went out and grew it. And then you're like saying the exact story. You're like, now I got to figure out how to get everybody paid. Like, I'm not doing the creative anymore. This is not fun. So how did that turn then in your life? What happened?
Well, when I started working for a few companies, and that moved my family from Northern California, we ended up moving down to LA. My wife and I have 3 girls. And then I spent a year working for a company, just doing design, concept designs, because I've led all kinds of teams doing these types of projects. And then I ended up working for a scenic shop for 6 months, and I literally got fired. It was what I joke, and I won't mention the name of the company, but like working for a redneck mob. I'll just put it that way. Scenic shops are very territorial. You have to be careful who you're talking to, because they might be trying to get the same project, and then it could be a couple $100,000 to a $1.5 million contract.
Wow.
And so it's very cutthroat, low margin. And especially when you work with IP clients, IP are intellectual property. So when you start working with Disney, Universal, the big players, SeaWorld and all that, it's a different ball game.
Sure.
And I hated it. It was just like, I was in Jason Bourne in the art world. The art, who's going to shoot me in the head, with a sniper rifle. And I, as artists, some of us artists can be very competitive, or it's really easily our identity. And when your identity is wrapped around that, you can step on a lot of people and hurt them emotionally by being creative or being somebody that's very motivated and driven. So I just found myself in this world, and I'm just like, Lord, I mean, I was on my breaks at work, I would go on prayer walks, and I'm just going, God, there's more. There has to be more than this. You put so much creativity in me, And I feel like it's just getting compressed and put in a box. So there's got to be more here. You're my father. Part that Red Sea, because I don't know where you're going to part this Red Sea at.
Isn't it
And
so interesting? I think, especially for us, I mean, men and women are the same in this, although I see it kind of happen a lot more in guys sometimes, that we'll get a word from the Lord, or we'll feel, this real connection with, man, this is the direction I'm supposed to go. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, you're like, we're off in this direction and we're making this thing happen. It's total striving land and all that. And you turn around and you're like, hey, I thought this was your idea, God. Like, where are you in the middle of this? And how did that play out in your life? Or, I mean, did you feel like that when you started your art business and creating all these incredible sets and all that, was that something that you felt like was what you were supposed to be doing, that you just took a wrong turn, or was that never the right thing from the beginning, or what?
No, great question. In the very beginning, I kind of stumbled on it because I was doing graffiti, and I was also in YWAM, Youth with a Mission. This is back after my high school years.
Yeah.
So I was just pursuing the work that I liked, but that opened up doors. So I started doing graffiti free for youth groups. Then I got paid a few times, and then I was pulled into a youth convention in Northern California. And then I learned in construction, growing up in the construction world, that you say yes and you learn how to do it that night, so you have work. That's not the best advice, but
I've been there, right? Never say no, right?
So, churches started asking me, hey, can you do props? Can you do stage sets? And I'm like, yeah. And I always had a knack for arts and, for sculpting, for painting, and different types of mediums and things like that. And then I started doing stage sets, and then I met a Hollywood sculptor that blew my mind. And that launched me into this whole kind of large scale sets and sculptures and, where can I go with this? And then I don't know if you noticed, but churches in the mid 90s started investing in their children's departments and building environments for their, children's spaces, entryways and things like that. And so I had a few churches reach out to me because I was doing work for youth conventions. Hey, can you do a children's environment? And so I started to go into that whole genre. But I wasn't really, I was very creative. I was your typical artist. I was somebody who just wanted to create art. I didn't have the mentality of how do I grow this and, start doing the $2-3 million gigs that other companies were doing at that time. And I didn't know how to shake hands, kiss babies. I didn't know
relational stuff that's required, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't do that. And then as the church market started to shift and change due to economics, things like that, they started going into more murals and less three-dimensional, which I really enjoyed, and I didn't like that. And so I wanted to continue expanding. So I went after the theme park industry. And that's when I started that whole process that opened up doors to bigger, larger scale projects.
Wow.
And I enjoyed every aspect of it. I mean, learning how to create trees and sculpt rocks and do fiberglass and steel and all that kind of stuff. So I really got a great education in how to do a lot of different types of disciplines.
We hear from artists all the time in my mentoring program or on the podcast commenting, they're like, I want a life like that artist, or like the person you interviewed. I want to be doing that too. And I think one of the things people underestimate so often is the years of little micro decisions that all of us make. I'm just hearing all these little turns, these little nudges, these little things that you did along the way to be faithful to the thing that was in your heart. And before long, because it's not like 20 years ago, you could have planned where that business was going to end up. None of us can do that. But as we continue to say yes, I'm interested though, as you kind of came to the end of that season and I'm looking at your website, talking about infusing beauty in broken things and this whole, all the things that you're doing. Such seems like a divergence from this part of your life that you were just talking about. So what began to shift in you so that you began to take a different direction? What is your life looking like now as an artist?
Yeah. And I'm not trying to, and I'm asking people to hear my heart here, because I know there's a lot of Christians that are watching your show.
Yeah.
And it's not my intention to offend you on purpose, but Christian art typically makes me want to throw up in my mouth. And I'm so sorry. And it's not Christian art. Let me rephrase that. It's the mentality in the church of Christian art and what Christian art is supposed to be. I'm a son of God. I'm God's son. So I'm a Christian, and God made me an artist.
Come on.
So in that, and I got to go back. I love edgy art. I was inspired. God used subway graffiti in New York to just blow my mind and make me want to pursue artwork for a reason. So I'm constantly following artists that are doing different things. They're doing artwork in abandoned locations, on different types of structures. So I'm always trying to figure out how can I do something different as an artist to brand myself and to continue to feed that hunger that I believe that God has put deep inside of me. So as a Christian growing up, my first mural was inside of an orphanage in Mexico, that no one will ever see. But I grew up in a church that had a strong emphasis on world missions. So I've always had that heart for ministry, street. I love urban kids, inner city type of stuff. I went to Cambodia. I did murals in Swai Pak, where it used to be a brothel with 9 stalls for girls down to 5 years old. Wow. And so there's a theme there that's always been in my heart that God has used me, even though I was working parallel in the commercial world as an artist, as a designer. But I wanted to get back to that heart of being able to have that freedom to pursue projects that I felt like were making a difference, connecting with my audience in an emotional way.
I really appreciate your heart in that, because I say this a lot to people. I believe that God cares that we create, not necessarily what we're creating. It's, there's this, especially among Christians, there can be this whole idea of Christian art has to look this way or be of these subjects and these themes and this imagery and metaphor and that sort of thing. And it's like, I think that's one of the reasons the Lord's, allowed me to speak into the lives of so many artists, because I'm a woven sculpture artist. So I go in the woods, I cut down trees, I take bark, I weave it together. I make these big nests and pods for luxury homes and hotels and things like that. So it has nothing to do with overt, Christian metaphor or whatever. And yet it's always the beauty of the mystery, I think, of when people do see things in my work or feel some sort of spiritual connection. I think, it's not by intent necessarily. It's by just the beauty of what God's doing in and through all of our work. And I think for so many of us, that I know for me, that was a real place of freedom when I came to that I could just create, that I didn't have to put all this baggage. Because I think, any kind of creativity in art, when it has all this front loaded baggage of it's supposed to be this, it's supposed to be like that or whatever, it gets icky. And there's a lot of pressure on the creative process, and that closes us down, and we're not able to be the people that God's called us to be. And so I really appreciate that perspective from you, and you continuing to be faithful to that, in what God's called you to do. And it's so beautiful now. I mean, talk a little bit about what you're doing. I've seen these incredible murals that you're doing and pieces that you're doing where fires have ravaged areas and all this. I mean, how did you come into creating art in these desolate places and really allowing that to be, vehicles of transformation in people's life?
Sure. Yeah. When I was let go from this company, the first thing I did, like 3 days later, is I went and did a mural in an alleyway of a beautiful woman, kind of looking down with a rose in her hair. And so 20 years back, you go backwards, I was working on a series called The Bride. And The Bride is based off of the book in the Bible, Song of Solomon, all from a teaching of a lady that was in one of my churches that really got deep into Song of Solomon. And it really challenged me because of my upbringing, major father issues, wounds, and, how to see, wow, God sees me as his bride. He sees me as this beautiful Shulamite woman,
Yeah.
in the book of Song of Solomon. And so I started this whole process of painting on canvas first, where I was painting these really beautiful women in these like urban city settings, because I lived on 6th and Mission in San Francisco, feeding homeless and working with inner city kids. And I loved the contrast, the juxtapose of this beautiful, soft woman's face in the middle of an urban destruction, or just chaos of life and sin, really. And so I painted this woman in the rose, and then I found this abandoned water park on Highway 15 on the way to Las Vegas. And my oldest daughter and I went there and we painted. I'm like, I'm not worried about painting in an abandoned water park because it's riddled with graffiti.
Right.
And there were actually graffiti artists painting, and I painted an image of a woman's face. And when I was doing that, there were major fires in LA, and in a fire in my hometown where I grew up, Chico, California, which Paradise completely just burnt down this whole city.
Wow.
And so I had about 24 friends I grew up with that lost their homes in the fire. And the first image I saw on Facebook was my friends posted their chimney. That was all that was left of their home. And as soon as I saw that chimney, I knew I needed to paint it. And then I reached out to my friends, and it took about a month later till I could actually go up there. And I painted this image of this woman's face. Of course, I had full freedom, freedom to do whatever I wanted. I wanted to do what was on my heart. And to me, that again, that woman represents God's beloved, his bride, mankind. So it was kind of my way of saying, God loves you. Jesus loves, the city of Paradise. Well, that mural went viral. It went viral locally. And there were literally people that were crying, weeping, because it was the first image of beauty that they saw after losing their whole community. And the community labeled that mural Beauty Among the Ashes. And then that was it. That's all I needed. I mean, like I said earlier, all artists want to do is create artwork that connects with people emotionally. I can sit in front of a Mark Rothko and cry for an hour.
Wow.
I can sit in front of a Jackson Pollock, and I did, and cried years ago. And I said, God, I prayed right there. I said, Lord, I want to create artwork that does this to people, that moves them emotionally. And I finally did that in Paradise. And then that's it. I did 20 murals that year, all through 2019. I did 3 art installations. And then it was so successful that we put on a one-night art exhibition in Chico, raised $60,000 that night.
Wow.
And we were able to help and support the Paradise Art Center. And then there's been more after that. But and then I was on the cover of LA Times. I was in New York Times, Washington Post, NBC. Never experienced anything like that in my life. And that didn't make me an instant success, but it gave me some credibility for, a lot of people out there, oh, hey, this guy's a serious artist.
Exactly. I love this. I love stories of the kingdom showing up, in our life unexpected. And I think, so I teach people marketing and, how to thrive as an artist and all this kind of stuff and all we're doing. And people always want to know, well, Matt, how do you get this notoriety? How do you get that award? How do you get recognized by this article or whatever, or this television? How do you go viral? And I'm like, for me, and I'm just hearing the same thing in your story, everything that's ever happened to me like that's been phenomenal, has been like, go viral or get you really great notoriety. It always comes out of the blue when I'm just faithful to do the thing that God's called me to do. It's like that in Matthew 25, you're faithful with little. Now I'm going to make you ruler over much. Do you approach it that way? Because it sounds like to me, you're just being who you are, who God's called you to be, doing the thing on your heart, and you're trusting him for the increase and the notoriety that he's going to bring at the right time.
Absolutely. I tell people you have to be married to it. It's a long-term goal. It's life. It's a lifelong goal.
That's good.
And so you can't, there are no quick, easy roads. And if that happens, it's just, it happens. But you have to go into going, okay, I love this. This is my passion. I have to do art. I have to create. This is what God has called me. And you have to believe in that and then just take steps. I can do a $30,000 mural for a client. My wife knows the next day I'm going to go down to the LA Arts District and I'm going to do something for free.
Right.
You know, I'm going to go paint Martin Luther King, or, you know,
right.
I did a Chadwick.
It's what we do, right? It's what you do. Right?
And honestly, that's when I'll get another job. I'll get another job because I painted Chadwick Boseman right after he passed away.
Wow.
Why? Because I love him as an actor. I love Marvel movies. And I know that there's so much going on with social justice right now, you know, and I just needed to go do something. And so you have to be that way. You've got to be like with all the, and again, forgive me, please, I'm pretty intense, but people that are just sitting in their houses.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to sit in my house. You know, I'm going to practice social distance. I'm going to wash my hands and put on a mask, but see you later. I'm going to go paint.
Right. Right.
I don't care if there's meteors hitting this earth. I'm going to paint and go out painting, creating something.
I love it. Well, Shane, I love your story. I love getting to hear your heart. I know folks are going to want to connect with you more and see the work that you're doing and all that. So where's the best place that people can connect with you to kind of take the next step?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Shane Grammer Arts. That's ShaneGrammerArts. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and ShaneGrammer.com is my website.
Awesome. Well, Shane, thanks so much for being on the program. Big inspiration for me, and I know for our listeners as well.